Now that Pope Francis has died, the Vatican is rushing. In order to prevent chaos or worse, everything must be carefully coordinated. With centuries of expertise, the Vatican has witnessed the worst. For this reason, it follows exact procedures, including confirming the Pope's death, relocating him to St. Peter's, and planning the conclave down to the hour and day. Time is of the essence. Confirming the Pope's death is the first priority before moving on. This confirmation, which was previously performed by Vatican officials in the chamber where he passed away, is now conducted in his private chapel. There, the prelate in charge of the Holy See's assets and income, Cardinal Camerlengo, assumes leadership of the Vatican until a new pope is elected. He is going to carry out the Silver Hammer Protocol. This used to entail yelling the deceased pontiff's baptismal name 3 times and tapping his head with a tiny silver hammer. It was an easy concept. You're most likely dead if you don't wake up when someone hammers you in the skull. After Leo XIII's death in 1903, the silver hammer remained in use at least until the early 20th century. You may be happy to learn that Pope Francis has not been subjected to it, even though it was in effect until John XI's death 60 years later. "George, are you dead?" the Camerlengo, who is now Kevin Cardinal Farrell, continued to yell 3 times. In response to George's apparent lack of response, Cardinal Farrell said, "I declare that His Holiness Pope Francis is truly dead." As a precaution, the Camerlengo may proceed with an electrocardiogram rather than a hammer. That was the method by which the death of John Paul II was verified by science in 2005. Pope Francis' body was immediately placed in an open coffin when his death was confirmed, though this is a relatively new development. Are you old enough to recall the funeral of John Paul II? His body would have been visible to you. It was set in a canaletto, or deathbed, which is a higher bier. Pope Francis reversed the decision in November 2024, although Pope Benedict XVI was also placed on one. Soon, more on that. For the time being, the Camerlengo and his men started taking care of the Pope's property to prevent theft and promptly sealed the Apostolic Palace. In the past, when the likelihood of someone stealing the deceased Pope's belongings was significantly higher than it is today, this custom was established. To maintain the integrity of the Pope's office, some objects are, nevertheless, deliberately destroyed. The first item to disappear would have been the fisherman's ring. This is how it used to seem, as you can see. Like all previous popes, Francis wore a special ring that was used to seal official documents. Although it may not seem like much today, official seals were essential in the past for granting documents legitimacy, and the Vatican still follows this custom. To stop forgeries, Cardinal Farrell had Francis' ring burned. The same silver hammer that used to tap dead popes on the head was responsible for the devastation until recently. Now, however, things could have been different. Instead of being smashed in, Benedict XVI's ring was ingeniously chopped apart in the shape of a cross when he abdicated in 2013. In any event, Cardinal Farrell demolished the ring in front of other cardinals of higher rank. Having witnesses who can attest to the fact that this ring was destroyed is beneficial. From this point on, all documents sealed in that pattern are recognized as fakes. Additionally, the Pope's lead seal was damaged. All other property is either archived, donated, or, in very rare circumstances, passed on to the Pope's successors. It's time for the Vatican to get ready for the public mourning period after ensuring the safety of the deceased's body and essentials. However, different popes had different ideas about how to go about this. The Pope's body is usually embalmed. John XXII, who was preserved with formalin, a mixture of formaldehyde and methanol, is the best example from the modern era. His body was exceptionally well preserved when it was dug up in 2001. At the time, Cardinal Virgilio Noy remarked that it appeared as though he had passed away just yesterday. However, embalming is not required. John Paul II declined to have his body embalmed. Francis's choice will be based on his individual preferences. The Swiss guards who will accompany the Pope on his last trip from the Apostolic Palace to St. Peter's Basilica will be required. Since Julius II asked for their presence in 1506, the Swiss guards have been keeping the Pope safe. Even after death, that continues. The Pope's body is protected day and night by the guards who stand with their thick armor and spikes. Very recently, Pope Benedict XVI ordered the lights at St. Peter's to be turned off. The Swiss guards refused to leave his side, demonstrating their dedication to duty. They most likely recalled the events of 1527 when 147 Swiss guards serving under Holy Roman Emperor Charles V sacrificed their lives to defend Pope Clement VII from 20,000 assailants. They'll also be by Francis' side during these times, you can bet. But just where will he be? Until recently, three main types of coffins were used: oak, lead, and cypress. However, Francis, who was known for his modesty, felt that this was too excessive, so his remains was placed in a plain wooden coffin coated with zinc, which will be on public display in St. Peter's for 3 days. The Pope will make his final trip to his final resting place on day 4. St. Peter's is still the final resting place of many popes. Beneath it is a necropolis, a literal city of dead. Since it was illegal inside the old city walls, the Romans would bury their dead in this necropolis outside. Would you not be aware that one of them is directly over the present-day location of St. Peter's? Francis will not be interred in the Vatican's crypt, unlike most popes. The Basilica of St. Mary Major is located here. Francis declared that it would be his final resting place in December 2023. Although uncommon, this is not unheard of. One of Rome's 7 pilgrim churches and one of the 4 main papal basilicas is St. Mary Major. Since becoming Pope, Francis has visited it more than 100 times. Honorius III, Nicholas IV, Pius V, Sixtus V, Clement VIII, and Clement IX are among the 6 of his predecessors who are already interred there. It is retro even though it isn't new. Very vintage. There hasn't been a pope since Clement IX was buried here in 1669. Even in death, the Pope will have better protection than the Swiss guards, even though the specifics are kept hidden by nature. The Vatican and all of its inhabitants, including the dead, are protected by sophisticated surveillance systems. Now that Pope Francis will be properly honored, the Vatican will move on to something far less certain, selecting his successor. The College of Cardinals will spend 3 days getting ready for a conclave 1 week following Pope Francis' passing. Although the term suggests secrecy, it wasn't always that way. It followed a 3-year-long election. The cardinals convened at the isolated town of Viterbo to select Clement VI's successor following his death in 1268. It was a convenient location with a lower danger of illness. However, the villagers quickly became enraged. It was taking far too long. To persuade the cardinals to make a choice, they had to use drastic tactics, such as denying them anything except bread and water or even taking off their building's roof so they would have to face the weather. Leave now. Gregory X was ultimately selected in September 1271. There was a catch, though. Not that he was a cardinal. Not that he was a priest. It took him 8 months to travel to the Vatican while on a crusade. Thankfully, things are much less problematic now. Gregory codified Viterbo's custom by directing that if a conclave went longer than 3 days, the cardinals would only get 1 supper per day. Additionally, secrecy gained a lot of importance. In 1274, the secret papal conclave was fully established. Prior to then, the cardinals were free to discuss it with whoever they wished, and in the early 1900s, Pope Pius X instituted a secret ballot. Today, the people would be unable to rip off the building's roof. The area used for conclave is closed off. Cardinals are also shut off. They aren't even permitted to view the news, much less use a computer or phone to communicate with others. What about these? To stop signals from passing through, the Vatican set up Faraday cages and cars with jammers during the most recent conclave in 2013. In order to prevent the existence of invasive drones, there will likely be more jammers presently. Despite their seeming extremeness, these tactics have been effective. How much longer will it take us to notice the white smoke this time? Pope Francis was elected in a record-short conclave that lasted just 1 day, from March 12th to March 13th. In 2005, Benedict XVI conclave lasted just 1 day, from April 18th to 19th. However, that does not imply that there is only 1 round. If a candidate receives a 2/3 majority from the College of Cardinals, he will be elected. Given that the new pope will be one of them, perhaps that won't be as difficult as it was between 1268 and 1271. The last pope to not come from the college was Urban VI in 1378, but it is not a necessary. There will be a lot of black smoke like this even though the cardinal electors know one another. Pope Francis was elected with 5 votes. Black smoke emanated from the Vatican 4 times prior to then, indicating that no new pope had yet been appointed. What gives the black smoke its hue? It is typically composed of small particles of carbon, but the white smoke that heralds the coming of a new pope is composed of mineral ash, fuel vapor, or water vapor. However, what takes place prior to the release of that white smoke? The victor will be asked if he accepts his election by the College of Cardinals. He will be invited to take on the papal name if the answer is yes. The white smoke will then start to rise into the atmosphere. Behind the scenes, the freshly chosen pope will don the customary white robes. In the meantime, the senior cardinal deacon will announce, "We have a pope," from St. Peter's balcony. The next pope will then address the congregation below from the balcony, marking his public debut. Following the public speech, the pope will return inside to speak to the College of Cardinals, formally ending the conclave and praising it for its service. Soon after his election, the new pope will select a date. This used to be a serious event with intricate crowning ceremonies. However, that hasn't happened in a long time. Francis, Benedict XVI, John Paul I, and John Paul II all chose modest inauguration rituals because they didn't want such a show. Will the next pope follow suit, in your opinion, or may something more significant emerge? For now, goodbye.